I want to just bring in another guest and then get the panel's reaction after I finish this interview. I'm joined by the Republican South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace. Now, Nancy Mace, thank you very much indeed for joining me. You made a lot of headlines because during the hearing of the then Secret Service Director, Kimberly Cheatle, before she sensationally resigned, you said this.
Most of my questions are going to demand a yes or no answer. Do you understand?
I do.
Okay, my first question. Both sides of the aisle today have asked for your resignation. Would you like to use my 5 minutes to draft your resignation letter, yes or no?
No, thank you.
Was this a colossal failure?
It was a failure.
Yes or no? Was it a colossal failure is the question, yes or no?
I have admitted this is a terrible...
This is a yes or no series of questions. Was this a colossal failure, yes or no?
Yes.
Have you provided all audio and video recordings in your possession to this committee, as we asked on July 15th, yes or no?
I would have to get back to you.
That is a no. You're full of shit today. You're just being completely dishonest.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
Chairman, I want to...
Come on.
We have to maintain decorum in this committee.
You are being dishonest or lying. You're being dishonest here with this committee. These are important questions that the American people want answers to, and you're just dodging and talking around it in generalities. And we had to subpoena you to be here, and you won't even answer the questions. We have asked you repeatedly to answer our questions. This isn't hard.
Well, I have to say, Nancy Mace, I did think you spoke for most of us when you used that expletive. Just on the decorum point, do you wish with hindsight you hadn't used that language, or do you think it pretty well hit the nail on the head?
I could have said much worse, Piers, on Monday. My frustrations were deep, and I believe I was simply saying aloud what every person watching that hearing across the country and the world was feeling that day, because here is a woman who is the director of the Secret Service and would not, either could not, would not, was unable or unwilling to answer even the simplest of questions on Monday. Like, she couldn't even tell us the number of Secret Service agents on the ground protecting Donald Trump at the rally that day. And you saw hand-wringing by Republicans and Democrats alike. Both sides, by the end of the day, most of us had called for her resignation. She sat there brazen, defiant, and basically gave a middle finger to middle America on Monday, and she deserved everything that I gave her.
It was a pretty shocking performance after a pretty shocking failure by the agency on the day that Donald Trump was shot. When you saw what she was doing in front of you guys, saw how she was obfuscating, saw how she wasn't answering really any questions, did it show you that there is something fundamental wrong with the Secret Service at the moment in terms of its structure and leadership?
Absolutely. But I think this is fundamental. This is a fundamental problem across many of our federal agencies. And the thing that I walked away with, and I had, 24 hours to think about it after I filed my articles of impeachment. By the way, I was going to force a vote on ousting her and firing her within 48 hours. But the thing that really struck me a few hours after the hearing was perhaps they didn't share any information with her because of anticipation of her testifying before Congress. And if that's what happened, if that was the case, if that's why she couldn't answer our questions, the problem's even bigger than I imagined. The obfuscating, this is clearly dishonest actions. They're trying to hide information from us, and she's going to be part of the cover-up, and we've got to get to the bottom of it. And I'm glad to see Speaker Mike Johnson create a task force specific to this investigation, because we all deserve answers, and we ought to know that they're going to do everything they can to ensure no one tries to shoot Donald Trump ever again.
Right. I mean, I've got to say, I've seen some baffling things in my time as a journalist over 4 decades. I cannot remember anything quite as inexplicable as what went down on that day that Donald Trump was shot. And we now discover from the FBI boss's testimony yesterday that this kid, who's 20 years old, we know so little about him, which in itself is so weird, that he was flying a drone over the stage area where Donald Trump was due to speak 2 hours before. And nobody from the Secret Service appeared to notice or do anything to try and work out who was flying this drone. Then he just ambles up onto this roof, which is clearly, to even the most amateur security observer, would be the most obvious place for an assassin to put themselves if they wanted to get a clear shot at President Trump. He's able to take his gun up there. We have members of the public warning officials that they can see this kid on this roof. There are Secret Service snipers with trained sights on him who've seen him, but he still gets off at least 8 bullets. None of this makes any sense to me. I'm not a conspiracy theorist until I believe there's a theory that can be proven, but none of this makes any sense.
Right.
How did this happen?
Well, I think it's one of two things, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist either. It's either incompetency or it's conspiracy. And I made the point in the hearing on Monday that between the time that they took their first photo and saw him on deck at the rally, 57 minutes went by between the time they took the first photo, the first agent took the first photo, and the first shots were fired. Now, the 20-year-old Crooks was killed within seconds. So clearly, it seems like logic would tell you they had him in their sights also. So it is baffling, which is why it's so important that we get transparency. And unfortunately, we're not getting it from federal agents. We are getting more information from local law enforcement on the ground, who also informed us that the Secret Service missed an important security briefing that morning, the morning of the rally. We also know that building wasn't swept, even though it was used as a staging location for law enforcement. So this law enforcement were buzzing around. People were buzzing around. Individuals saw him. This was able to happen, and no one did anything about it. And so more than one person should probably resign. We need to force testimony by Secretary Mayorkas, and we need to hear from whistleblowers who have information that can piece the puzzle together that the federal government refuses to do today.
Are you concerned, as some people have been, about the impact of a DEI policy with the Secret Service? When you looked at the way that and I don't want to single out the female agents. I'm sure they're all highly trained and as elite as the men in the Secret Service. But there was something really uncomfortable about watching the interaction and behavior of those female agents at the front of the car, in particular the one who couldn't even apparently holster her gun properly several times. That imagery does not send to the world a confidence that the presidents of the United States, previous or current or future, are being protected by the world's most elite agents.
Right. And even former Director Cheadle said on Monday she didn't have any quotas, but we know because we have the receipts, it was over 33% that she required be female agents. Now the thing that really worse than the video, Piers, was the harrowing image of Donald Trump with his fist in the air is an image that will go down iconically in history. But the one thing that really disturbed me from that image was the female agent trying her best to cover up Donald Trump, but she left his entire head, his face, his heart, all exposed. So if there was another shooter, a second shooter, she was unable physically to lift him up off the ground because she was too small, but also she left all of his major organs exposed. So if he were to get shot in that position, he would have been killed. And that, to me, I'm sure there are many women who are trained in Secret Service or in law enforcement who are taller than 5 feet and who could cover him up and help him keep him protected in that particular gesture. That was really disturbing for me to watch.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'd be saying this from the start because although it was an iconic image of defiance by Donald Trump, he should never have been allowed to do it. You know, when he was taken down by the Secret Service, their next move collectively should have been to gut him off that stage and into a car and out of there as fast as humanly possible without exposing him to the potential of a second shooter. But instead, they allowed him to stand back up. They put a relatively small female agent in front of him, which doesn't protect him from his upper torso up to his top of his head. None of that, again, made sense to me. So what are you guys all doing? It's like Keystone Cop stuff.
No, seriously. And we, you know, when America is strong, the world is strong. That was definitely a show of weakness on the world stage. And it's incumbent upon us to ensure that we have strong leaders who are going to call it like they see it, like I did on Monday, and ensure that this culture of failure in the Biden administration does not continue, which is why it's so important that we elect Donald Trump, but that we elect strong leaders, because very few people in Congress in either chamber are willing to call it out, are willing to ask the tough questions, and are willing to do more than write a strongly worded letter. If we want to fire someone, an officer that we can impeach, then we ought to force a vote on it, for example, which is what I did Monday night. I'm tired of seeing hearings and nothing coming from them. So if you are responsible for this horrific tragedy that happened, if Biden isn't going to fire you, we ought to force your resignation. That's what we did on Tuesday morning. But it's time more for action, less talking, more action. When these kinds of horrific things are happening, people have to be held accountable, and that's got to be on both sides of the aisle going forward.
Two quick questions away from this before I let you go. One about President Biden's final address to the American people. We assume it's his final address from the Oval Office. What was your response watching it last night?
Well, he was clearly confused, and he would not admit to why he was stepping down from his campaign. It didn't give any confidence in him being able to lead our country over the next 6 months. That was very telling that they're continuing the cover-up. No one is willing to admit why he's stepping down from the campaign. And if you don't have the strength or mental acuity to run a race for president, you certainly don't have the strength or mental acuity to run the United States of America. I believe that the 25th Amendment should be invoked here. But also there's no one more weak than Joe Biden than Kamala Harris. So November just can't come here fast enough today, because I want to show American strength. And I will tell you the words of Bibi Netanyahu last night that Kamala and Joe Biden both skipped made me feel more proud to be an American than any other foreign dignitary who's been in there to date. It was deeply inspiring. That is the kind of strength America needs to have going forward to fight terrorism, to fight against the woke left, to fight against all these policies that are bringing our country down.
Finally, as a woman, a Republican woman, do you think that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance both have to be more careful about the language they're using now towards a female nominee on the other side? Now, I'm going to give you 3 examples. One, Donald Trump yesterday called Kamala Harris dumb as a rock, a lunatic and garbage. And J.D. Vance, from an earlier clip from an interview with Tucker Carlson several years ago, called her a childless cat lady, which is now being used, obviously, by Kamala Harris's side as a stick to beat the Republicans with as a bunch of misogynists. Does the game have to change now in terms of rhetoric because there is a woman now likely to be the nominee?
I just watched Kamala Harris give a speech just moments ago where she called every single Republican an extremist and was spouting off lies and conspiracy theories about our party. I'm someone who likes to call it like I see it. I do believe that it is very important that we as Republicans talk about women's issues and that we have women on the stage. We have women speaking at Trump rallies. And in fact, it was Donald Trump who invited me onto the stage at the convention to talk about foreign policy, to talk about women's issues, and to tell my story as a single mom and as a suburban mom. And look, when Trump was president, he had so many women in his cabinet. He supports women. He supports IVF. He supports contraception and birth control. He supports women who are victims of rape and victims of incest. And those are the kinds of things that I want to see us talk about. And I've had really good conversations with Donald Trump about women's issues. I know that he cares. He's a father of girls, and he's a grandfather. And he's done a very good job so far talking about them. But we've got more to do. We've got between now and November to talk about the border, to talk about inflation, and to talk about how we support life and also how we support women in every single city across America.
OK. Congresswoman Nancy Mace, thank you very much indeed for joining Uncensored.
Thank you, sir.
Let's go back to the panel for a quick reaction to that. Wajahat, your response to what happened to Donald Trump, putting aside whether you like him or not, we know where you sit with him personally, it does seem to have been a quite spectacular failure by the Secret Service to protect someone who'd been president of the United States.
I think we can all agree that we've never seen anything like that before, all of it. We need more information, specifically how come they didn't know about the shooter, how come after he was tagged about 90 seconds before the shooting by the crowd, how come he wasn't stopped, how come, you know, you and I have seen these episodes where Secret Service protect individuals, you know, how come they didn't just whisk him away? He got back up during an active shooting for that photo. That itself, honestly, when I was watching them, I'm like, why? What are they doing? And then also, as of yesterday, I think the American people deserve to know more information about what happened. Christopher Wray of the FBI said, we don't know if a bullet hit him or if it was a shard. Is it a bullet? Is it a shard? What's the hospital records? I think Donald Trump should release the hospital records from that night. We don't trust Ronnie Jackson or Ronnie Johnson, whatever he calls him, his doctor, who's no longer a doctor. He said, oh, no, I treated him. Give us the hospital records. What's the treatment? What's the diagnosis? What's the injury? How's he healing? Give us more information and do more of an investigation as to how the Secret Service, especially that team at that time, bungled it up from before to the shooting to after the shooting. We deserve more information.
All right, Elizabeth, I mean, is it unreasonable for that information to be made public? I mean, it was interesting that the FBI director, Wray, yesterday seemed to cast some doubt over whether Donald Trump's ear injury had been sustained by a bullet or by something else. Would the best way to clear that up just be to release the medical records?
I can't speak for Donald Trump, but I agree. I think in the interest of transparency, the American people deserve that when it comes to what happened to him, which we all saw, unfortunately, on our screens, which was terrifying, but also in regards to what happened with the Secret Service failure. The American people deserve better than that. My father-in-law was actually sitting behind Donald Trump, so I had one of the most terrifying 45 seconds of my life, not knowing if either one of them was alive. We know that an American's life was actually lost. I think that the Secret Service director resigning is the bare minimum, but it is what is owed, of course, to this family and to all of us. But I think a deeper investigation must be had. I think the American people deserve more. They deserve answers. Donald Trump deserves answers. The family who lost a father and a husband deserves answers. And I think we all need to know what happened. We need to ensure this never happens again. And we need to know what caused this failure to begin with. I think it's something that I would hope we all agreed on.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Knowles, there was a strange survey came out from YouGov, a poll, saying that 42% of Democrats blame Donald Trump and the Republicans for the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, which just seemed to me to be a completely absurd finding.
Of course they do, because Joe Biden and all of the Democrat leadership have established that premise. Joe Biden's entire campaign was predicated on Donald Trump posing an existential threat to democracy and Donald Trump following in the footsteps of Adolf Hitler, which he said in many ways, many times. And so if those two things are true, they're not true, obviously, like so many things that Biden says, but if those things were true, then that would justify the assassination of Donald Trump, unless you think that we ought to play soft with Hitler or with existential threats to our country. So I'm not surprised that some 40% of Americans would blame the man who was almost murdered. I also don't stay up at night wondering the answer to the questions of this mythical shard or any other ways that the Democrats are trying to downplay the very near, within a hair's breadth, assassination of Donald Trump only did not occur because at the last second he turned his head about 20 degrees. I know that it wasn't a shard from a teleprompter, for instance, because we have photographs from behind of the two teleprompters looking just fine after the bullet went through Trump's ear. As to why he wasn't immediately whisked off stage, I wonder why he wasn't held back in the holding room when they saw the shooter walking around a long while before the speech. But me, I'm just a regular Joe. When I go to a speaking event, they'll sometimes hold me back. I'm not the president of the United States, so that needs an answer. But then when he went down after having been shot, the reason they didn't pull him off is he went down, and he's a pretty big guy. We were hearing earlier that some of these agents couldn't even cover up to his chest, and then Trump himself said, hold on, let me get my shoe on. And he stood up there and he reassured the crowd, which demonstrated incredible political leadership, showed courage literally under fire. And then they got him off stage quickly after that. The answers that need to be given here are not how Donald Trump showed such immense courage and how this iconic photograph of political bravery was taken. The real questions are, why was Donald Trump not given sufficient security resources? Why did the Secret Service lie about the requests from the Trump campaign to get sufficient security resources? And how far up does this go? Sure, both parties now want to fire the Secret Service director, and she resigned, finally, under duress. But what about her boss, Alejandro Mayorkas, the DHS secretary? What about his boss, Joe Biden? How on earth is the most threatened man on planet Earth, Donald Trump, even needing to ask for additional security? And how on earth could it have been denied?
I completely agree. Got to leave it there. Thank you to my panel, Michael Knowles, Wajahat Ali, Elizabeth Pipko. I appreciate it very much indeed. That's it for us now. Many of you have noted that we are the content kings here at Uncensored.